They entered the courtroom like mourners, Chance, Delilah, and Jesse Combs, Diddy's daughters, each dressed in muted tones, their eyes downcast, their expressions unreadable. They weren't here to condemn their father. Not yet. They were here to support him until they weren't. What followed wouldn't just shake their loyalty. It would shatter it. It began like any other day in court. The cameras were lined up outside. Reporters jostled for angles. The public yawned, expecting another slow drip of procedural drama. But inside that courtroom, something was building. Something sharp. Heavy. It came in the form of a sealed file, slid across the prosecution table like it was just paperwork. But what was inside it was a weapon. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, standing, we have newly obtained video evidence, submitted anonymously. It directly supports prior testimony. We request it be entered into the record. The defense objected immediately. We haven't reviewed this footage. We don't even know the source. This is a trap. But the judge wasn't interested in games. He opened the file, reviewed the timestamps. His face didn't change, but his voice did. Admissible? Diddy leaned into his attorney, tense. What the hell is it? His lawyer's eyes flicked nervously toward the prosecution. We're about to find out. The screen was wheeled in, the lights dimmed, and that's when his daughters began to stir. Delilah's legs started to bounce. Jessie clenched her fist so tightly her knuckles turned white. Chance looked as if she was bracing for impact. And then the video played. It was raw, shaky, clearly not filmed for public eyes. A private party. Familiar faces. Famous ones. But not the Instagram-friendly kind of footage. No filters. No edits. Just reality. Crowded rooms, loud music, champagne, and smoke. But underneath it all, discomfort, fear. A girl in a frame, clearly intoxicated, tries to walk away. A man grabs her elbow. She's led back. The camera doesn't follow. But the implication is clear. Someone off-screen says, keep filming. You never know when you'll need it. That was the line that broke the room. Delilah gasped. Jessie shook her head violently, whispering, no, no, no. Chance stood up abruptly. And then, together, they left, tears in their eyes, not one of them looking back. Inside, Diddy exploded. Turn it off. Turn that sh*T off. My kids are here, he yelled, voice cracking. The judge didn't flinch. The screen stayed on. The gallery was frozen. And in the back of the courtroom, watching calmly, sat 50 Cent. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to, because he was the one who had delivered the archive. Not out of pity, not out of guilt, but out of war. A war that started years ago. Quiet, cold, personal, and now it had just gone public. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Not today. The trial of Sean Diddy Combs had already stretched on for weeks. Another headline-soaked circus of lawyers, allegations, and tabloid drama. But beneath all the noise, one thing had stayed solid. Diddy's control, his swagger, his silence, his daughters in the front row. Until now, after that video was played, after the room witnessed what looked less like a party and more like a trap, everything shifted. The judge declared a short recess, but nobody moved. It was as if the courtroom itself had stopped breathing. The video still hung in the air like a smell you couldn't scrub off. Faces blurred, actions implied, but undeniable. Diddy's daughters had fled in tears, and Diddy himself had erupted, shouting, panicked. He wasn't just angry. He was caught off guard. And that was rare. When the recess ended, the judge didn't waste time. We will proceed, he said. Witness, take the stand. Cassie stepped forward, calm, composed, and colder than anyone had seen her before. Not scared, not vengeful, just done. She adjusted the microphone and looked at the jury, her voice steady. People think abuse looks like bruises, she said. But that's not always true. Sometimes it looks like parties, like private jets, like front row seats to a cage you don't even know you're in. Diddy sat at the defense table, eyes locked forward, lips pressed tight. He didn't just control where I went or what I wore. He controlled who I was, what I said, what I was allowed to think. And he always made sure I knew. There were cameras. There was footage. And if I stepped out of line, he'd release it. She paused, letting that last part land. He said I'd be destroyed if I ever talked. That no one would believe me. That I'd be nothing without him. The prosecutor stepped forward. Ms. Ventura, are you aware of how this video archive came into our possession? Cassie shook her head slowly. No, I only saw it when it played in this courtroom. But the moment I did, I knew it was real, because I lived it. Across the room, Diddy's legal team scrambled through folders, tried to recover, trying to find anything that could undo the damage. But they all knew this wasn't just a leak. This was a message. And in the back of the courtroom, unmoving, sat 50 Cent. He didn't blink. He didn't gloat. He just watched. Because years ago, Diddy had tried to bury him. In business, in the media, in reputation. Now the roles had reversed. He had handed the prosecution the footage. Not out of morality, but out of calculation. He knew where the bodies were buried. He just chose the right time to start digging. And as Cassie continued her testimony, the trial shifted. It was no longer just about allegations. It was about exposure. The illusion had cracked. The Emperor wasn't just naked. He was on tape. And 50 Cent had press play. The second video began without warning. No narration. No legal disclaimer. Just grainy footage spilling out across the screen, like a secret finally slipping through locked doors. The courtroom lights dimmed again, and everyone leaned in, not out of curiosity, but out of dread. They had seen what the first clip did. Shattered Diddy's daughters, froze his legal team, and shook even the most jaded reporters into silence. Now came part two. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 a.m. A sprawling estate. Another all-white party. But this wasn't the polished kind of footage curated for Instagram. This was handheld, chaotic, raw. Too real. The camera moved through hallways, private rooms, shadows. Music pulsed in the background, loud, muffled, almost violent. People danced, but not with joy. They moved like they were being watched. Or worse, recorded. In the corner of one room, a young woman sat slouched on a velvet couch, eyes heavy, limbs loose. Someone off-screen handed her a drink. She didn't respond. Another person laughed, not with her, at her. Then the voice came again. Keep filming. I want all. There was no mistaking who it was. Diddy's voice. Clear, casual, controlling. The courtroom reacted as if the air had been yanked out of the room. One juror shifted in their seat, visibly disturbed. Another looked away. The judge clenched his jaw. Diddy himself sat frozen, eyes locked on the screen. No outburst this time. No demands to shut it down. Just silence. The kind that only comes from being cornered by your own shadow. The video ended abruptly. The screen went black. And then, for a full 10 seconds, there was nothing but silence. Cassie sat on the witness stand, eyes forward, unblinking. She had seen this before, not the footage, but the feeling, the chill that followed Diddy into every room. The fear that you didn't even realize had become normal. The prosecutor turned to the court. Let the record reflect the footage was submitted anonymously, verified independently, and consistent with prior sealed testimony. Diddy's lawyer leapt to his feet. This is slander by ambush. We don't know where this came from. This could be fabricated, edited. The judge raised a hand. We've authenticated the source. Sit down, counsel. In the back row, 50 Cent leaned forward slightly. That was all it took. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't grandstanding. He didn't need to be. Everyone in the room was already whispering. It was him. He had delivered the footage. The man Diddy once tried to erase. Tried to ruin. The rival he thought he had outgrown. And now, 50 Cent had done what no lawyer, journalist, or plaintiff could do. He pierced a myth. The mogul. The mastermind. The untouchable. And he did it not with noise, but with a USB drive. The trial had just shifted from defense to damage control. And no one, especially Diddy, had any idea what 50 had left to show. The room hadn't recovered from the footage. Even with the screen now dark and the lights restored, the atmosphere was thick, like smoke after fire. No one spoke above a whisper. No one shuffled their papers. The weight of what they'd just seen lingered like a second presence in the room. Cassie Ventura sat on the witness stand, unshaken. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice steady. "Ms. Ventura, in your own words, can you explain what we just saw?" Cassie nodded, slowly. Her tone didn't waver. Her eyes didn't flicker. "What you saw," she said, "wasn't a party. It was theater. Every moment, every camera angle, every person in that room was there for one reason. His reason." She glanced toward the defense table, toward Diddy. "He told us it was art. He told us it was protection. But it wasn't. It was surveillance. It was leverage. It was about power." Diddy didn't react, but his posture had changed. He leaned slightly forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped tightly, like he was holding something together by sheer force of will. Cassie continued. "He controlled the people, the pills, the playlists. He told us what to wear, who to bring, what to do when the camera was rolling, and what to do when it wasn't. You didn't say no. You didn't even think about saying no, because by the time you realized what was happening, you were already trapped. The jury was hanging on her every word. I didn't stay because I liked it," she said. "I stayed because he made me think I couldn't leave." The defense rose, eager to interrupt. "Objection," editorializing. "Overruled," the judge said without hesitation. Cassie reached into her bag and pulled out a folded contract. She held it up for the court to see. "Non-disclosure agreement," she said. "I signed 3 of these. Every time I threatened to walk, I got a new version, tighter, meaner, with more ways to silence me." She placed it on the stand like it was a piece of evidence in a crime scene. "He told me if I ever talked, no one would believe me, that I'd be humiliated, that everything I said would be turned against me, and that he had the footage to make sure of it." She looked directly at the jury. "I believed him. For years. Until now." Silence. Then, from the gallery, a camera clicked, a reporter forgetting, just for a moment, that they weren't supposed to be documenting history this directly. The judge didn't reprimand them, because this was history. And in the back of the courtroom, 50 Cent watched without emotion. He hadn't just cracked open a case. He'd cracked open a culture. The house of mirrors Diddy had built was starting to collapse, and the truth Cassie spoke now was the wrecking ball. Diddy leaned back in his chair. For the first time, he looked small, because the world wasn't looking at him with awe anymore. It was looking at him with doubt, and that was more dangerous than any charge on paper. He didn't flinch when the videos played. He didn't blink when Cassie laid bare the inner workings of Diddy's empire. He just sat there, in the back row of the courtroom, watching silent, still. 50 Cent had shown up alone. No entourage, no statement, no press. But he didn't need a spotlight. Everyone already knew. He was the reason the archive had surfaced. The courtroom didn't know how to process it. They were used to celebrities testifying to defend each other, or to disappear altogether. But this was something else. 50 had inserted himself into the trial not with noise, but with evidence. Not for clout, but for closure. Because this wasn't just about the law. This was about revenge. Their rivalry had gone back years, decades, and it was never just business. It was personal. Diddy had tried to freeze 50 out of industries, music, liquor, fashion, film. He'd blackballed people behind the scenes. He'd made calls to the same gatekeepers, the same money circles, the same press outlets. Diddy wanted to dominate, and 50 was a one man who refused to kneel. 50 never forgot that. But he didn't retaliate with tweets or diss tracks this time. He waited, he watched, and then he got the footage. No one knows exactly how. Some say it was leaked by a disgruntled employee. Others believe 50 had it for years, collected, archived, just waiting for the right time. However it happened, he curated it. He didn't dump the whole archive. He chose what mattered most, what would cut deepest, and he delivered it, not to TMZ. Not to Instagram, but to Cassie's attorney. The file came through encrypted. No name, no return address. Just a message. Use it. He's not untouchable anymore. Cassie didn't know the source. Neither did the prosecution. But when 50 Cent walked into the courtroom the day the footage dropped, everything became clear. Diddy saw him, and for a flicker of a second, something passed between them. Not hatred, recognition. Because Diddy knew what 50 was capable of. He always had. But he'd underestimated just how long 50 was willing to wait for payback. And this wasn't petty. This was strategic. It was war on a delay. 50 had built his career on surviving every attempt to bury him. Now, he was using that resilience to do the one thing Diddy thought was impossible. Bring the empire down from the outside. No subpoena. No interview. Just evidence. And a chair in the back row to watch it all collapse. The press still didn't know how to write the story. Was he a whistleblower? A vigilante? A rival with receipts? He didn't care. Because for 50, this wasn't about titles. It was about truth, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when the walls finally fell, he was the one who handed the court the first hammer. By now, the courtroom had changed. The energy, the faces, the sense of inevitability. No one was asking if Diddy's world was falling apart anymore. They were asking how much further it would collapse. And Diddy's lawyers knew it. They came out swinging. The lead defense attorney, polished, aggressive, and clearly rattled, approached the witness stand like a man who knew this was his last chance to stop the bleeding. "Ms. Ventura," he said, voice sharp, "let's talk about your career." Cassie sat still. "Sure. You built your brand during your relationship with my client, didn't you? Music videos, tours, endorsements." "I did." "You enjoyed the lifestyle, jets, luxury, red carpets. You stayed with him for years." "I did." He smiled like he'd found a crack. "So at what point did it become abuse? Was it before or after the private islands and award shows?" Cassie leaned forward slightly. Her voice didn't rise. "It was always abuse. I just didn't know it had a name." A ripple of silence passed through the courtroom. The lawyer wasn't done. He picked up a stack of printed photos, Cassie and Diddy at events, smiling, laughing, posed like the perfect couple. "Explain this, then," he said, holding one up. "You look happy, comfortable, in control." Cassie stared at the photo. "I was surviving." He scoffed. "That's convenient." She turned to the jury. "You learn to perform. Because if you look scared, people ask questions. And if people ask questions, he punishes you in ways you can't imagine." The lawyer's tone turned sharp. "So you're saying every photo, every smile, every public appearance was fake?" "I'm saying I was trained to be what he needed me to be. It's not called freedom when there are cameras in every room and contracts in every drawer." The gallery was dead quiet. The defense attorney tried to pivot. "Let's talk about the video. The one that shook this courtroom. You claim you had no idea it existed, yet you participated in these parties willingly. Isn't that right?" Cassie's eyes narrowed. No one at those parties was fully informed. You don't know what you agreed to when agreeing means survival. Those weren't parties. They were productions. He pushed harder. "Then why didn't you leave?" She paused, then answered with the line that would make headlines across the country. "Because I was groomed to believe leaving meant disappearing." The jury didn't move. The judge didn't blink. The defense attorney turned away, out of moves and out of control. And in the back of the courtroom, 50 Cent sat watching, expression blank, eyes sharp. He wasn't here for justice. He was here for the collapse. And he was witnessing it in real time. Cassie had just dismantled the last remaining defense with one truth. Control doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles at you from across a private jet. Diddy looked smaller now. Not legally, existentially. The image was crumbling, and no amount of lawyers could piece it back together. The courtroom had grown so quiet. It felt like the air had been vacuumed out of it. No more videos. No more shouting. No objections. No cross-examinations. Just silence. Cassie had left the stand, her testimony complete. But the impact of her words lingered like a bruise. The judge called for a brief recess, but no one moved. The gallery was locked in a daze. The jury stared straight ahead. Diddy sat slumped at the defense table, eyes glazed, shoulders hunched. He looked like a man who had finally heard the verdict, even if it hadn't been read yet. And then, from the back of the room, a figure stood, 50 Cent. He didn't speak. He didn't move toward the front. He didn't need to. Just standing was enough. Every camera in the room turned toward him. Every eye locked onto him. This was no longer a rumor. No longer a whisper behind closed doors. The man who had once been Diddy's biggest threat in business was now the man who'd helped dismantle his legacy. A security guard instinctively stepped forward, unsure what 50 was doing, but the judge raised a hand. Let him be. Because the court understood this moment was bigger than protocol. It wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about reckoning. Diddy turned and looked at 50 for the first time during the entire trial. Their eyes met, and for a split second, the room held its breath. There was no anger in 50's expression, no satisfaction, only stillness, the kind that comes after you've watched a machine collapse under its own weight. He didn't gloat because he didn't have to. The video had spoken. The testimony had spoken. And the silence now, that was the loudest sound of all. Diddy didn't say a word. He didn't deny it. He didn't threaten. He just stared at the man who had waited years for this exact moment, the man who didn't fight back in public, who didn't post or brag or plead. 50 Cent had simply waited and delivered the truth. When the recess ended, the judge returned and announced that closing statements would begin the next morning. But the trial, in the minds of the public and the press, was already over. Diddy's empire had taken a hit it wouldn't recover from. Cassie's voice had cracked the image. But 50 Cent? He was the one who had given that voice a megaphone. As the crowd slowly filtered out of the courtroom, journalists rushed to get the story online. Camera crews jostled in the hallway, and security tried to hold the chaos back. But 50 didn't join the noise. He slipped out quietly. No press, no interview, just a presence. A man who had been underestimated one too many times. And as the world asked the question, what else was on that hard drive? 50 Cent vanished into the crowd, silent, certain, victorious.